Hi, my name is Rod Cleef, and I'm the host of the Lifetime Cash Flow Through Real Estate Investing podcast. And every week I interview multifamily rock stars, and we talk about how they've built incredible wealth for themselves and their families through multifamily properties. So hit the like and subscribe buttons to get notified every Monday when a new episode comes out. Let's get to it. Welcome to another edition of How to Build Lifetime Cash Flow Through Real Estate Investing. I'm Rod Cleef, and I'm thrilled you're here. And I know you're going to get tremendous value from the interview we're having today. It's with a gentleman named Scott Crone, and he's with Coda Management Group, and that's CodaMG.com. And Scott comes from the multifamily world and now is in the self-storage world. So we really haven't talked about self-storage much on this podcast. And it's an asset class that I feel very strongly about as well. I feel like it's a great asset class. So this should be a lot of fun today. Scott, welcome to the show, buddy.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate your time.
Yeah, absolutely. So maybe you could just talk a little bit about your journey and ultimately land on that transition from other asset classes to self-storage. Take it away. Let's hear who you are, my friend.
Well, I first got into multifamily when I was pursuing a master's of architecture at IIT, and my professor, who I was the TA for, he owned a real estate development company, which was also an architectural and contracting firm, which focused specifically on multifamily. And so my master's thesis was a 400 unit development. And I worked on that for 6 years. And then I became the project manager of a 40 unit facility and then a 51 unit facility. And we did a bunch of conversions of apartments into condos, and we're managing apartments as well. So I worked for him for 6 years, and that was the background of how I got into multifamily. When I started my own company back in 1998, we began in single family, but then we quickly moved into multifamily as well. And we began, developing a lot of that different types of products. But the crash changed everything. The crash was the first really financial meltdown that we've seen in a long, long time. And everybody was pushed into apartments again, because that was the only avenue that banks were lending on. And it became a really competitive marketplace. So we were buying distressed apartments and fixing them up. But then I also got exposed to self-storage. And for me, it's the comparisons are very natural, very similar. I mean, we're renting a box, right? The only difference between a multifamily box and my box is I don't have toilets and I don't have kitchens. But it's just a different, more simplistic model. And if I can design an apartment building, I can certainly design a self-storage facility. And so what I saw, though, was there was a lot more tangible things that we could see within self-storage in terms of feasibility studies, market, where the market is in terms of saturation, which was harder to find within multifamily. And so that's what attracted me to the self-storage arena.
Yeah, no, I mean, certainly as part of your analysis on a prospective self-storage, if you're building them, you've got to see what the saturation is. Yeah, and I played around with this a while. It's probably been 10 years ago. I played around with it and did some market studies and threatened to maybe do some self-storage. Never pulled the trigger on it. It was just one of the asset classes I looked at. I looked at assisted living as well, but. So do you primarily build self-storage since, your architectural background, or do you also buy existing to reposition them?
The bulk of our portfolio as projects that we've taken that were underperforming commercial buildings and converted them into self-storage.
Oh, no kidding. Wow.
And so, one was the old Lincoln Log Factory. One was the first fireproof building in Milwaukee. And so we actually got historic tax credits for that project. And then a project that we did in actually both Chicago and Dayton, the original developers wanted to turn it into multifamily, but because of the parking restrictions and the parking demands, they couldn't do it. And so as a result, that's why we were able to come in and convert it into self-storage. So we certainly don't need as much parking as on a multifamily.
Oh, no.
So it's one major distinction of the two products.
Oh, and absolutely. Yeah.
So in each of those cases, I looked at it and said, hey, I understand why it can't be multifamily because of the column lines. It restricted in terms of, how many cars you could get in there, those sorts of things. And so, having the background in multifamily really helped me to transition into self-storage.
No, that's fascinating. So Lincoln Log Factory, I remember playing with those when I was a kid, those brown logs. So this was the place where they built those and you turned that into self-storage.
We did.
Crazy.
Yes.
How many square feet was that factory? Just curious.
That was 70,000 square feet.
Wow.
So,
Wow.
and it was
Okay.
is in West Logan Square, which is just north and west of the Loop in Chicago, and it was on the 606 rail line, which was an elevated train system within Chicago, so that they could get raw materials in and out and product out without having to go, stop traffic. And so it's right off the 606 now, which is a pedestrian path, which was the original train tracks.
Oh, that's crazy. Yeah, I know they have what's called the L in Chicago, which is the transit system. So they had well, that's really cool. What a fascinating, fun project. But I'm sure intense as well, but kind of cool, the history on that. So what other sorts of buildings have you converted to self-storage? Just give me drill down on that a little more. I'm just very curious.
Our building in Milwaukee is over 100,000 square feet. It was, as I said, the first fireproof building, and was really ornate and had some, very nice features, especially for a warehouse. But it was as a Harley Davidson dealership at one point in time. It was a car dealership, and they, they would store the cars in the upper floors. And so the thing is built like a tank. And then Toledo, we converted a medical warehouse building into self-storage. And then in Dayton, the building had been vacant for 40 years because they couldn't convert it into multifamily. And so we bought the building and converted it into self-storage. But the two really go hand in hand, because why we really selected that site was there's a tremendous amount of multifamily being built around it.
Sure.
And, the problem when people are downsizing to multifamily is that they don't have as much storage. When we were developing the products here in Chicago, we would have people coming from homes that are 5,000 or 6,000 square feet, and they'd be buying the biggest unit we had, which was, 4,200 square feet. And they're like, what am I going to do with all my stuff? And I'm like, well, you're just going to have to, sell it or put it into storage. And that was even before I knew about storage. So the two really go hand in hand. And then our building in Louisville used to be a candy factory. And so, and they used to store stuff for the Kentucky Derby in the building.
No kidding. Wow. That's crazy. Well, I can imagine actually from a construction and safety and so, and infrastructure component, self-storage would be a hell of a lot easier than really probably anything else, because again, it's just boxes. You don't have to put plumbing in. You had very little electrical. Correct me if I'm wrong. It's just a much easier conversion. Am I right?
You're absolutely right. And one, I would say another distinction is when we were developing multifamily, we had to maintain a specific unit count, because when we were doing a PUD, a planned urban development or zoning, we would be allowed to do
density,
X number of units, right? And that impacts the schools, that impacts the fire department, all those sorts of things. Within self-storage, I can change the locker configurations based upon the demand. And it's just, unscrewing a metal wall and repositioning it. So I have a lot more flexibility within the self-storage space.
Yeah. Yeah. So guys, what that's called is density, and you try to calculate or try to determine what you're able to get. Everybody always wants to get the highest density they can if they're building multifamily, but in self-storage, there's no restrictions there. You could have, I'm guessing that there's really no restriction at all as to the number or size of the units. Is that an accurate statement, or does the city or county government, do they get involved in that?
When we're dealing with an existing box, and we're within a footprint, they really don't care as long as we meet the fire and life safety requirements. So that is the bigger restriction is fire and life safety. We have to have travel paths and those sorts of things, which makes it a little bit different, because if we look at multifamily, this is where the advantage of multifamily is. When we were looking at net sellable or net rentable space compared to the gross, we would try to have like a 90% efficiency or 10% loss rate in terms of circulation. So the best way to do is walk into a center entry and then have double loaded corridor. And we'd minimize the corridor and minimize the staircases and the elevator so that we would maximize the revenue of the building. Within self-storage, because the lockers are smaller, we have a lot more circulation space. So our efficiency goes down to like 70% as opposed to 90%. And so that is one of the advantages of multifamily over self-storage is, we can make the buildings more efficient in terms of sellable square footage.
Got it. So when you find one of these buildings that you're going to convert to self-storage, what is the average conversion time? Is there an average, or is it just really to so many variables that it's hard to throw a number at it?
Actual construction time, I would say about 9 to 12 months.
9 to 12 months. Okay.
The typical process. But obviously you have, in each case, you have to do, drawings, you have to do permit submissions. We try to avoid PUDs. We try to avoid rezoning it if at all possible, because obviously it adds a lot more length of time and cost to the process.
Right.
We have had to go through that process. We have done those things. I've done it both on multifamily as well as self-storage, but in terms of actual construction, it's about 9 months.
Okay. And then once, obviously you're starting from zero. If you're transitioning to self-storage, you have no rented units when you start. What is the average ramp up time to get to an occupancy that supports debt and so on and so forth? I mean, just again, you're satisfying my own curiosity about doing these conversions.
It's actually very similar to multifamily. That's where they really align. In both cases, the occupancy is about 3% per month, unless you're in heavily in an area which is heavily underserved. And so as a result of it, typically it takes 1 year to cover your operational expenses, and then year 2 to cover your debt coverage.
Gotcha. Yeah. So I've got students I think I've got one that's got 7,000 units now that have gone into this self-storage space, but they buy existing, and then I think they bring in efficiencies. I guess there are some more cutting edge computer-based entry and exit and security and so on and so forth. Can you speak to that? What if that comes into play at all in what you're doing?
Absolutely. So when we compare multifamily to self-storage, and we say a Class C multifamily or Class B or Class A, that typically designates the quality of the neighborhood and the risk level of that associated product. Mm-hmm. In self-storage, that's not necessarily the case. So Class C would be like first generation, more rural and smaller, and typically owned by a mom and pop and very low tech. And we consider that to be like a penny stock. A Class B would be like suburban and a little bit larger. And it might be along the lines of, instead of like 200 units, it could be up to 400 units. And we consider that to be like a blue chip. And they might have technology that you're describing. And then the Class A we describe as like urban and growth. And we consider that like a growth stock. And that's anywhere from like 400 to 1,000 units. Wow. And so, and that's fully climate controlled. And you drive into those facilities. And so in each of those, in a B or an A, what we'd have is a keypad or an entry system that you enter a code that is designated for that person. So similar to an entry code within an apartment building. And then that way we know that they're accessing their space. But also if they're not paying, then we can keep them out of the building or out of the facility until they've made the payment. Got it.
Okay. So what's next for you? Are you going to continue to look for these conversion opportunities, or do you have any interest in buying existing, or is the market just too hot for that to satisfy you? I guess with your background, your low hanging fruit for you would be the conversions. Yes,
we do both. We have started buying existing facilities, but like multifamily, it's becoming more difficult to buy them and find them because you want to not overpay. You make your money on the acquisition as opposed to the disposition. And so as a result of it, we do have to be more selective. So we have closed one in Maine. We're working on another one in Virginia that we own. And then we're about to close one in Michigan, which is an existing facility. And that one, we're not doing any construction. It's a little bit of an anomaly for us. All we're doing is we realize that the existing rates were 30% below market. So we're going to come in and, manage the facility better and then potentially flip the facility.
Nice. Okay. So no interest in building multifamily right now. I mean, there's a lot of that going on.
There is.
Yeah.
I'm just not in the markets where I see that being an explosion. I think, Texas, I think, Florida and the Carolinas or Tennessees are great areas for those. But the markets that we're in Chicago, we're not seeing a whole lot of that. It is occurring. But the one thing that my 30 plus years in this industry has taught me is don't dictate what the market is. Respond to the market. Don't try to dictate it.
Right. Yeah, no, I've got memos on that. I won't bore you with that. My experiences in that regard. So, let me ask you this. So, excuse my naiveness as it relates to the resiliency of self-storage, but how did self-storage do through the 08-09 crash? I mean, I'm sure it pulled back like everything did, but how significant? I think multifamily, my recollection is about 11% nationally in collected rents, but how did self-storage do?
Well, that's a great question. So we went back and we looked at the last 4 recessions. So we went back to first oil, and then we looked at the internet bubble, and then we looked at and then we even compared 9/11 and then savings alone. And even though the most recent pandemic was technically not a recession, we included that one because of how fast the market dropped within the first month. So we went back and looked at each of those, and we compared the occupancy and rents collected versus what was happening in the gross to GDP. And each of those self-storage dropped maybe 1 or 2% and then rebounded 3 or 4%.
No kidding.
And so it stayed above 90% all the way across. And that's why we deemed it recessionary resistant.
Yeah.
The only asset class that I've seen, I mean, obviously people need places to live, right? That's the original reason why I got into multifamily and housing was because everybody needs some place to live. Right. And people need food, and we're going to be born, we're going to live, and we're going to die. Right. I mean, these are the givens in life. But when the market became extremely competitive within multifamily, that's when I began moving into the self-storage, because it's hard to compete against those when the cap rates are being compressed so high. And I will be honest, I probably sold prematurely on my multifamily because I was seeing that we were approaching the top of the cap rate, and we were getting compression into at that time, 4%. And I was like, hey, that's got to be near the top. But we've, multifamily's gone to 3% now. Right. And I mean, it's just been incredibly aggressive. And so as a result of that, I probably sold too early, but I'd rather be on the front end than on the back end.
Never try to time the market. You'll get your butt handed to you. Yeah. So no, that's, if you sold at 4%, you did just fine. So, so back to my question, I'm not sure if you answered it or not. We've gone a lot of different directions here. Are you still looking for those conversion opportunities? You're still looking for those old warehouses that aren't underutilized or not utilized at all?
Absolutely. So we're working on conversions right now. We're working on new development, and we're working on expansions. So we're doing all 3 of those things.
Nice. Yeah. So from a team standpoint, in the self-storage business, the multifamily business really is a team sport. You get into larger assets. Talk about your team. What does that look like? And are you involved in the actual management of the asset after you acquire it? The build up and the management, or do you hire operators to come in and do that for you?
We used to. So we used to have a third party management, and we opened up 4 facilities during the pandemic, and 3 of them were with that. And what we began seeing was that the occupancy rate was very slow, but the operational expenses were getting very large and exceeding the budget. And so we opened up the 4th one under our own banner, One Stop Self Storage. And we've been outperforming the third party REIT since the beginning. In the pandemic, we had the 3 that we opened up with the third party REIT. And then the 4th one, we opened up our own, and we outperformed it in both occupancy as well as controlling our expenses. And so we have moved all of our portfolio over to our own brand, One Stop Self Storage. So our team we have a director of sales and acquisitions. We have our director of construction, and then myself, which is more over the development and the financial side of things. And then we have our internal office support, but then we have local people at each of the locations. Of course. And so, but we are doing remote. We are going to go, the new facility that we're buying, and will be 100% remote managed.
Really? So no bodies there at all. It's all automated.
Well, we will have people go there, to maintain it in terms of keep it up, overlock, those sorts of things. But in terms of processing it, we'll begin doing it all remote.
So someone can go there and lease a space without actually someone physically there to help them do it?
Exactly. So during the pandemic, we were deemed essential, but a lot of people still did not want to interact with people, obviously, for health concerns. And so a lot of the process became automated or self-automated within that process. So we can do all the leases, all those sorts of things remote. And then all they'll have to do is we'll tell them where to go. They drive up, they'll enter the keypad, there'll be access, and then they'll put the lock on their own lock.
Put their own lock on. Got it. Okay. Fascinating. Wow. Technology is amazing. Well, wow. Well, listen, thank you for, educating me and hopefully my listeners as well about this exciting asset class. My partner, Scott's done $6 billion in acquisitions, and there was a lot of self-storage in there, and he's been threatening to have us start looking at some of those assets as well. So I appreciate you giving me a little more education on it, and I can see why some of my students are super excited about it. But listen, Scott, I really appreciate you coming on, and it's very much my pleasure to meet you, sir.
Thank you very much for having me. I appreciate it.
Rod, I know a lot of our listeners are wanting to take their multifamily investing business to the next level. Now, I know you've been hard at work helping our Warrior students do just that using our ACT methodology, which is awareness, close, and transform. Can you explain to the listeners how they can get our help?
You bet. Guys, we've been going nonstop for 3 years, building an amazing community of like-minded people. And our coaching students, which we call our Warriors, have had extraordinary results. They've purchased thousands and thousands of units. And last year, we did over 1,000 units with our students. And we're looking to grow this group and take it to the next level. We're looking for people who want to follow a proven framework that's really step by step, and then leverage our systems and network to raise equity, to find and close deals, and to build partnerships nationwide. Now, our Warrior community is finding success in any market cycle. So if you're interested in finding out more about how you can become more of our incredible network and take advantage of the incredible opportunities that are coming very soon, apply to work with us at mentorwithrod.com or text CRUSH to 72345, and we'll set up a call so you can check us out and we can check you out. That's mentorwithrod.com or text CRUSH to 72345.